My mom secretly arranged blind dates while I was married. My husband ended up going to one of them. Can you imagine your own mother actively trying to destroy your marriage? Not because she hated my husband, but because she truly believed he simply wasn't good enough for me. And the day that lie blew up in her face in front of a complete stranger. Well, that was a day neither of us would ever forget. I'd been married to Daniel for 4 wonderful years, but my mother, Janet, didn't think our marriage was real. See, we'd gotten married at the courthouse. It was just Daniel, me, and 2 witnesses. Daniel's mom was dying of cancer, and we wanted her to be there to witness her son get married. She passed away 3 weeks later, truly grateful she'd seen us wed. My mother, Janet, refused to come. She declared that courthouse weddings didn't count, that we'd embarrassed her by not having a proper celebration. For years, she told everyone we were just living together, not really married, even after I showed her our marriage certificate. She'd introduced Daniel as my boyfriend, or roommate, never my husband. At family gatherings, she'd seat us at separate tables, claiming married couples sat together, and you two don't qualify. When we bought our first house together, she told relatives I was making a mistake buying property with someone I wasn't married to. My cousin literally had to pull out our wedding announcement from the newspaper to shut her up. But then Janet decided the real problem was that Daniel wasn't good enough for me. He worked as a mechanic. He owned his own shop, had 4 employees, made good money. But Janet? She thought I should have married a doctor or a lawyer. She'd been telling her friends I was single since the day we got married. One day my phone rang. A stranger named Anthony was on the line, confirming our dinner date for Saturday. I was stunned. "You have the wrong number," I told him. He sent me a text. It was from my mother, Janet, with my photo, my phone number, and a message saying I was shy but definitely interested. I told him I was married, that my mother had no right to give out my information. He was apologetic, saying Janet had specifically told him I was single and looking for a serious relationship. This happened 3 more times that month. Different men, calling to confirm dates my mother had arranged. She'd signed me up on her church's singles ministry list without my knowledge. She'd given my info to her hairdresser's son, her dentist's nephew, some random man she met at the grocery store. Each time, she told them I was single, successful, and desperate for a husband. I confronted her, my voice shaking with rage. She just shrugged. "I'm just trying to help since you're stuck in a dead-end situation with Daniel." A dead-end situation. About my marriage. She claimed she was doing me a favor, finding me better options before I wasted my fertile years on someone who'd never amount to anything. I told her to stop immediately, or I'd cut contact. She cried, "You'll thank me one day." The calls stopped for about 2 weeks. Then I found out she'd just gotten sneakier. She'd started using my work email, which she got from my company website, to sign me up for online dating sites. She created profiles with my real photos, my real job information, everything accurate except my relationship status. My coworker found my profile on 3 different sites and asked, "Hey, did you and Daniel split up?" I had to explain my mother was psychotic and actively trying to break up my marriage. Daniel, bless his heart, was incredibly patient through all of this. He just kept saying Janet would get tired of it eventually. But then she escalated. She started showing up at these dates herself to explain why I was running late. She'd sit with these unsuspecting men for an hour, talking about what a great daughter I was and how much I needed a successful man to take care of me. One of the men she'd done this to worked at the same medical complex as my friend Rachel. He told Rachel the whole story, how this crazy woman had kept him at a restaurant for 2 hours, insisting her married daughter was going to leave her husband for him. Janet had actually told him Daniel was abusive, and I was too scared to leave without another man lined up. That's when Daniel had enough. "I'm going to handle it my way," he said, his jaw tight. Sure enough, Anthony, the first man, called again. Janet had reached back out to him, claiming I'd changed my mind and was ready to leave my husband. She'd set up dinner at an upscale steakhouse for Friday night. Daniel put on his nicest suit. He went to the restaurant. Anthony was there with Janet, who was mid-sentence, explaining that I was just parking the car. When Daniel sat down at their table, Janet went absolutely white. Daniel extended his hand across the table. "Hello, I'm Daniel. I'm her husband." Anthony's face went from confused to utterly shocked in about 2 seconds flat. Daniel thanked him for his patience and apologized for wasting his evening. Janet sat frozen, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Daniel explained very calmly that Janet had been lying about my marriage status and my availability. He said she'd been doing this for months, setting up dates without my knowledge or consent. Anthony's eyes went wide. He looked at Janet like she'd just confessed to a crime. Daniel kept his voice steady and polite the whole time, like he was explaining a simple misunderstanding, not confronting my mother's insidious campaign to destroy our lives. Anthony stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This is completely unacceptable," he boomed, his voice angry but controlled. Other diners started looking over. "I would never have agreed to any of this if I'd known the truth." He apologized again to Daniel, grabbed his coat, and walked away. Janet finally found her voice, sputtering that she was just trying to help, that she only wanted what was best for me. Anthony didn't even look back as he walked straight out of the restaurant. Janet turned to Daniel, making excuses, saying I deserved better opportunities. Her hands were shaking, her voice high-pitched with panic. Daniel leaned forward. "Your campaign to break up our marriage ends tonight," he told her, his voice firm. "If you ever contact another man on my behalf again, we will pursue legal action for harassment." Janet tried to argue. "He's not good enough. She could have married a doctor." Daniel cut her off. "Her opinion is the only one that matters. She chose me, she's happy, and you need to accept that or stay out of our lives." Janet's face went red. She started to stand, but Daniel was already signaling the waiter. The waiter approached nervously. "Is everything okay?" Daniel pulled out his wallet, paid for Janet's meal in cash, leaving a generous tip. He stood up, putting on his coat. Janet grabbed his arm. "You can't just walk away from me," she shrieked. Daniel gently but firmly removed her hand. "The conversation is over," he said. "You know exactly what will happen if you continue." Then he walked out, leaving Janet alone at the table with half the restaurant staring. I found out later she sat there for another 20 minutes. I was at home, trying to watch TV, when Daniel walked through the door. I jumped up. "What happened?" He told me everything, sitting in the kitchen, from the moment he sat down at that table until he left her there. Relief hit me so hard I actually felt dizzy. He'd finally confronted her directly. But right behind the relief came a wave of anxiety. I knew Janet. She never handled being challenged or embarrassed, especially not in public. "Do you think she'll stop now?" I asked. "I hope so," he said. "But we need to be prepared for her to get worse before she gets better." The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. I ignored the first few calls. I knew it was Janet, and I wasn't ready. By the time I finally answered on the 17th call, I was already exhausted. Janet was crying and yelling, almost impossible to understand. "Daniel humiliated me in public," she wailed. "You need to apologize for his behavior." I let her rant for a few minutes while I made coffee. "Janet," I finally said, "Daniel had every right to confront you about the lies you've been spreading. I'm proud of him for standing up for our marriage." She screamed, "You're choosing a mechanic over your own mother." I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I took a deep breath. "I'm choosing my husband over someone who is actively trying to destroy my marriage. Daniel is a good man who loves me, and your obsession with his job is your problem, not mine." She started crying harder. "You're breaking my heart." Then her voice changed. It got cold. "I'll tell the whole family Daniel is controlling and abusive," she threatened. "I'll tell everyone the same lie I told Anthony." My stomach dropped, but I'd expected something like this. I opened the recording app on my phone and hit record. "If you spread those lies, I will share the recording of this conversation with everyone to prove you're lying," I told her. "I have proof of all your schemes, and I'm not afraid to use it." Silence. For 10 long seconds. I could hear her breathing. Then she started crying again, softer this time, more desperate. "I'm only trying to save you from wasting your life with someone beneath you," she whimpered. "You have so much potential, Daniel is holding you back." "My life with Daniel is exactly what I want," I stated. "If you can't accept my marriage and respect my choices, we can't have a relationship right now." She asked how I could cut off my own mother. "I'm not cutting you off," I said, "but I am setting boundaries. And if you violate them, there will be consequences." She hung up. 2 days later, Daniel called me from his shop. Janet had just shown up while he was working on a customer's car. "Is she still there?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "That's why I'm calling. She's trying to convince me to leave you, because you deserve better." My blood ran cold. She actually offered me money to walk away from our marriage. "How much?" I asked, dread forming in my throat. $5,000, he said. She'd brought a check already written out. I told him to get her out of there, that I was on my way. He said his employees were handling it, but I could hear the stress in his voice. I left work immediately. My hands shook on the steering wheel. When I pulled into the parking lot, Janet's car was still there. Inside, I found Daniel by the main work bay with 2 of his employees. Janet was near the office door, holding her purse tight against her chest, face red, eyes wild. Daniel saw me, held up a hand. He turned back to Janet, his voice calm but firm. I love my wife. No amount of money will ever make me walk away from our marriage. Janet's voice got louder. He's holding you back. You could have a real life. Daniel told her to leave. When she didn't move, he said he'd call the police for trespassing. One of his employees, Dennis, had his phone out recording. Janet noticed, her face getting even redder. She started backing toward the door, still spewing insults. Daniel picked up his phone, started dialing. Janet rushed out. Her car roared to life and sped away. Dennis lowered his phone. Daniel thanked him, asked for the video. Daniel wrapped his arms around me. His whole body felt tense. I need to finish up a few things, he said. I waited in my car, my mind replaying Janet's words, the bribe. When Daniel finally came out, he looked exhausted. At home, he showed me the video. Janet clearly offering $5,000 for a divorce. We have proof now, he said. I called my cousin, Elena. I told her everything. The blind dates, the profiles, the bribe. Elena kept saying, "Oh my God." She said Janet had been telling different stories to different relatives. Some thought we had problems, others that we weren't really married. Janet had been manipulating information for months. Most of the family had no idea. Elena offered to help spread the truth. I was relieved, but also worried about splitting the family. Elena insisted the family needed to know. 3 days passed. Silence from Janet. I started to relax, thinking maybe she'd finally gone too far. Then Janet's sister, Nicolette, called. She'd heard what happened at the restaurant and the shop. She wanted to meet for coffee to mediate. I hesitated, but she sounded genuine. Nicolette was already there. She hugged me. Tell me. Everything, she said. I recounted the whole story. Nicolette listened, her face growing more concerned. She knew Janet disapproved of Daniel, but had no idea about the dating schemes. Janet always struggled with control issues, she said. She has class anxiety. She wanted you to marry someone wealthy to make herself look good. I asked if she could convince Janet to stop. Nicolette sighed. She rarely listens. You might need to cut contact completely. I don't want to lose my mother, I said. Nicolette squeezed my hand. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they change. 2 weeks of blessed silence. Daniel and I went to dinner, hiked. I thought the confrontation had worked. Then my uncle called. Are you safe at home? He asked. Janet had told him Daniel physically threatened her at his shop. My body went hot with anger. She's lying, I told him. She showed up to bribe him. I pulled up the video on my phone and sent it to him. Watch it. See for yourself. He promised to call back. I threw my phone on the counter. Janet's telling people you threatened her. I told Daniel. His jaw tightened. We need to stop this. My uncle called back. He'd watched the video 3 times. He apologized for doubting me, promised to send the video to other relatives. But over the next few days, calls still came in. Some believed me. Others were hesitant, drawn to Janet's dramatic story. A cousin asked if I was covering for Daniel because I was scared of him. I felt sick. I sent her the video. She texted back later. I'm so sorry. The video makes everything clear. But Janet's lies were spreading faster than I could correct them. Daniel's father called. A friend from church mentioned rumors about Daniel. I explained everything. He listened quietly. I want to help, he said. He offered to speak with Janet, parent to parent. I wasn't sure it would work, but I appreciated the offer. Daniel came home. I handed him the phone. He gave his dad Janet's number. Daniel's father met Janet at a coffee shop. He called us afterward, looking tired. It was difficult, he said. He told her Daniel was a good man. Janet spent the entire hour explaining why Daniel wasn't successful enough or educated enough. He tried to point out Daniel owned his own business, that we were happy. She dismissed it. Mechanics are working class. She deserves someone with a professional career. He asked about the dating schemes. She admitted everything, defending her actions, saying she was trying to save me. Daniel's father said she was completely fixated on social status, genuinely believed she was rescuing me. She showed no remorse. After he left, Daniel and I sat on the couch, heavy with the realization. Janet would never change. She fundamentally believed she was right. This hurt, but it also brought clarity. I'd been hoping she'd eventually accept us. Now I knew that wasn't going to happen. We need to establish permanent boundaries, I told Daniel. He nodded. Probably should have done it sooner. We drafted a formal letter to Janet. No more contacting men on my behalf. No more spreading lies. No more showing up at Daniel's workplace. Absolutely forbidden from spreading false abuse allegations. Violating any boundary would result in a restraining order. We both signed it. I mailed it. Janet called Nicolette, crying, "They're being cruel. Unreasonable." Nicolette told her the boundaries were fair. But Janet wouldn't accept it. 2 days later, an email from Janet. Long detailed. No apology. Just careful justifications for every action. She ended by saying she would respect our boundaries because we were forcing her to. But she still believed she'd been trying to help me achieve the life I deserved. I read it twice, feeling sick. No remorse. Just self-justification. 3 weeks of silence. I started to believe the boundaries were working. The anxiety faded. I felt lighter. But I also felt grief over the damaged relationship with my mother. I'd accepted she wouldn't change, but it still hurt. Then Elena called. "Have you heard about the family gathering Janet's planning?" My stomach dropped. Janet had invited about 15 relatives to dinner at her house, specifically telling them not to tell Daniel or me. She was planning some kind of intervention. I thanked Elena. I decided not to say anything to Janet. Confronting her would just give her another chance to make excuses. Daniel and I simply wouldn't show up. Saturday came. Daniel and I spent the afternoon working in our yard. My phone started ringing that evening. First, my Aunt Karen. "Why didn't you come?" Janet had told everyone we refused because we were being difficult. I explained. Karen was shocked, apologetic. Then my Uncle Mark. The same story. "Janet made it sound like you were isolating yourselves." I told him it wasn't true. He apologized for not questioning Janet's version. Over the next 2 days, more relatives called. Each conversation followed the same pattern. They'd heard we refused, I explained. They realized Janet had been lying. My cousin James even mentioned noticing Janet's stories didn't match reality. Wednesday afternoon, a call from an unfamiliar number. Ellen Harmon, Janet's best friend from church. My stomach tightened. Another defender. But Ellen surprised me. She was the one who'd given Janet access to the church singles ministry list. She apologized profusely, horrified, saying she had no idea Janet was using it to interfere in a marriage. She'd thought Janet was just trying to help a single daughter find a match. Ellen told me she'd confronted Janet. Janet admitted everything, calling it aggressive matchmaking. Ellen had told their entire church group the truth. Several people stopped talking to Janet. Ellen felt terrible for enabling it. "I wanted you to know I've set the record straight." I hung up, feeling a strange mix. Relief that the truth was finally spreading beyond our immediate family. But also sadness that it had come to this. Janet had damaged so many relationships because she couldn't accept my choices. A few weeks later, Daniel and I celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary at our favorite Italian restaurant, where we had our first date. "The past few months have been rough," Daniel said, taking my hand, "but they've also shown me how strong our marriage really is." I agreed. We'd learned to protect our relationship first, not trying to keep everyone else happy. The crisis had been painful, but it had also taught us important lessons about putting our marriage first. When we got home, there was a card from Janet in the mailbox. Generic anniversary message. Flowers. Her signature. No mention of the past months. No apology. Just a small gesture. Daniel looked at it. At least she remembered the date. I put it on the kitchen counter, trying not to read too much into it. October. Nicolette invited us to Thanksgiving at her house. She was hosting instead of Janet, to create a neutral space. "Janet will be on her best behavior," she promised. Daniel and I talked it over. We missed our supportive relatives. We decided to go. I was nervous to see Janet, but determined not to let her control our family connections. Thanksgiving Day. Nicolette greeted us. The house smelled of turkey. Janet was already there, in the living room with my aunt. When we walked in, Janet glanced up, then looked away. No smile. No hello. Throughout the afternoon, she spoke only when absolutely necessary. When I asked her to pass the rolls, she handed them over without eye contact. When Daniel asked how she was doing, she said fine, and turned away. It was awkward, but better than confrontation. Other family members made extra efforts to include us. My Uncle Mark asked Daniel about his shop. My cousin James asked for advice about buying a house. My Aunt Karen kept the conversation flowing. During dinner, my aunt asked Daniel about his business. He told her about the second location he was planning to open. Janet's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She went completely still. My uncle leaned forward. Daniel explained it was near a new shopping center. My cousin asked if he was hiring. Everyone congratulated him, except Janet, who just cut her turkey into smaller and smaller pieces. The conversation moved on, but I watched her jaw tighten. She didn't say a word about the expansion, just rearranged food on her plate, tiny sips of water. After dinner, I carried dishes to the kitchen. Janet came in. Stood there until I turned around. "I'm glad you're happy," she said, her voice like she was reading from a script. I thanked her for respecting our boundaries. She nodded once, walked back to the living room. 30 seconds. Like talking to a stranger. I went back to the dishes, hands shaking a little, not from fear, but from the strangeness of it all. We drove home. "How are you feeling?" Daniel asked. "I don't know," I said. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good either. Her cold politeness still hurts. Daniel said she probably wouldn't ever fully accept our marriage. "We'll never have the relationship I used to imagine," I agreed. "But we can exist in the same room. Maybe that's enough." I looked out the window at Christmas lights. Some problems don't get solved, they just become something you learn to live with. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Janet's name. I almost didn't answer. "I want to have lunch," she said. "Just us." Part of me wanted to say no. Another part was curious. Was she actually ready for a real conversation? I agreed to Saturday. I arrived first at the cafe. Janet walked in on time. We ordered. Small talk about the weather. Then she put down her cup. I may have gone too far with some of my methods. Not an apology. Just an acknowledgement she'd crossed a line. "I still think you could have done better than Daniel," she said. "But I can see that he makes you happy. I suppose that's what matters." Her tone still suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. I put down my sandwich. "I need you to understand something. Daniel isn't just acceptable or good enough. He is exactly who I want to be with, and I wouldn't trade him for anyone." Janet looked uncomfortable, shifted in her seat, but she nodded. I realized this lukewarm acceptance might be the best I'd ever get. She wasn't going to suddenly love Daniel. She was just going to tolerate it, because the alternative was losing me completely. "Can we start rebuilding our relationship slowly?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "but the boundaries stay in place. No more dating schemes. No more lies. No more showing up at Daniel's work." She agreed without arguing. It felt like progress, even if it wasn't the reconciliation I'd once imagined. We finished lunch talking about neutral topics. When we hugged goodbye, it was less awkward. Over the next month, we met twice for coffee. Light conversations. Superficial but peaceful. I learned to accept this limited version of our relationship. She'd never be the mother I wanted, but she could be someone I saw occasionally without constant conflict. Daniel's second shop location opened in December. We invited family. Janet showed up, a gift bag in hand. She congratulated Daniel briefly, then moved to talk to other guests. My cousin pulled me aside. "I'm proud of how you handled everything," she said. "Watching you set boundaries with Janet inspired me. Sometimes you have to accept people won't change," she added, "and the only thing you can control is how you respond to them." Something positive had come from this painful experience. Christmas brought the first real sign of change. A card addressed to both of us. From Janet. Inside, a gift card to an upscale Italian restaurant. And a note. For Daniel and my daughter. Daniel's name first. Calling me her daughter, in connection with him. It wasn't much, but it meant she was trying, in her own limited way. Daniel squeezed my hand. We both knew this was significant. We used the gift card. The food was excellent. But the real gift was knowing Janet had acknowledged our relationship in writing for the first time ever. New Year's Eve. We hosted a party. I invited Janet. She called to ask what time, what to bring. She showed up at 8:15 with a bottle of wine. She stayed mostly quiet, talking with my aunt and uncle. Then Daniel told a story about a customer whose car had mice in the air filter. Janet actually laughed. A real laugh. Her eyes crinkled. Several people turned, surprised. No one had ever seen her relax around Daniel. The rest of the evening felt surprisingly normal. When midnight came, she hugged me briefly. "Thank you for inviting me. I had a nice time." January. A promotion at work. Senior analyst, significant raise. I called Janet to share the news. I half expected criticism. She congratulated me immediately. "I'm proud of how hard you've worked," she said. She asked questions about my new responsibilities, my career path. The entire conversation focused on my achievement. No mention of Daniel. No comparisons. When we hung up, I felt lighter. This was the first time she'd celebrated my success without adding conditions or criticisms. Daniel came home. He picked me up, spun me around. I always knew you'd get the recognition you deserved. February. Uncle's birthday party. Daniel and I helped set up. Janet arrived, started talking with my aunt. Daniel's father arrived, made his way through the room. He stopped near Janet. I tensed, but they started talking. Surprisingly normal. They talked for 15 minutes. Later, Daniel's father called us. I had an interesting conversation with Janet, he said thoughtfully. They talked about their children, about letting go of expectations. Janet admitted she was learning to accept her vision for my life wasn't what I wanted. It's difficult, she said, but pushing you away completely would hurt worse than accepting your decisions. Daniel's father thought she seemed genuine, trying to change, even if slowly. Valentine's Day. A card from Janet. Simple design, red hearts. Inside, wishing you both happiness. Her signature. No passive-aggressive comments. Just a straightforward sentiment. I showed Daniel. He put it on the refrigerator next to the Christmas note. Evidence that Janet was changing. A week later, I called Janet. Lunch. She suggested a cafe. We ordered. I thanked her for respecting our boundaries, for making an effort. She put down her tea. It's been difficult to accept my involvement needed limits, she said. I'd convinced myself that breaking up your marriage was the right kind of protection. But watching our relationship fall apart had forced her to realize pushing me away would be worse than accepting my choices. I still struggle with seeing you married to Daniel, she admitted. But I'm learning that your happiness matters more than my vision. I told her I was proud of her. She mentioned Nicolette had pushed her to see a therapist. She'd started 2 months ago, working on control issues, anxiety about social class. Her therapist helped her understand her need to control my life came from her own insecurities. She'd wanted me to marry someone wealthy to validate her worth as a mother. It's uncomfortable, she said, but I'm starting to see how my behavior damaged our relationship. I told her I was proud. Getting professional help showed she was serious. Spring. Daniel and I started discussing buying a bigger house. Weekends spent house hunting. One Sunday, I mentioned it to Janet. A pause. Then she asked about our budget, what kind of house. I told her we were hoping for something in the $200,000 range, but needed to save for a down payment. Janet said she wanted to help. With the down payment. As a gift. Not a loan, not a manipulation tactic. I have money set aside that I was planning to leave you in my will, she said. I'd rather give it to you now. I was cautious. Will this come with expectations? No, she said. I want to support your life together. Accept or refuse, it won't damage our relationship. I said I needed to discuss it with Daniel. That evening we talked. If it was genuinely without conditions, it would help us buy a house sooner. We agreed to accept cautiously, watching for signs of control. 2 weeks later, we found the perfect house. 3-bedroom ranch, big backyard, good schools. Right at our budget limit. With Janet's help, we could make it work. I called her, expecting criticism. Instead, she asked for the address, wanted to see it before we made an offer. We met at the house. Daniel, me, the agent, and Janet. She looked at the kitchen, bedrooms, basement. Asked practical questions about the roof, heating system. In the backyard, she turned to Daniel. I can see why you like it, she said. The yard will be great for kids someday. Then she asked him about his plans for the garage, if he'd use it for projects. Daniel explained. Janet nodded, like it made perfect sense. They talked for minutes about the house, the neighborhood. This was the first time she'd engaged with Daniel like a normal person, asking his opinions, treating his answers as valid. When we left, Janet hugged me. Let me know when you're ready to make an offer. I'll have the check ready. Our offer was accepted. Inspection clean. Appraisal matched. Janet transferred the down payment money, exactly when she said she would. No strings. No comments about what we owed her. We signed the closing papers. When I called Janet to thank her, her voice sounded genuine, not forced. She asked when we were moving if we needed help. The whole conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like huge progress. We spent 2 weeks packing. Janet called once just to check in. No criticism. No unwanted advice. Just listened. I'm excited for you, she said. Moving day arrived. She sent a text wishing us luck. Can't wait to see the new place once you're settled. Daniel read it over my shoulder. Raised his eyebrows. Neither of us expected this level of normalcy. We hosted a housewarming. Janet responded immediately, saying she'd be there. Party day. She arrived on time carrying a large potted plant. I thought it would look nice in your living room. It did. She walked through the house, admiring the layout. Complimented the kitchen. Daniel's father arrived. I watched nervously as Janet approached him. They started talking about the house, the neighborhood. She asked him questions about his week. He seemed surprised but pleased. They chatted for 15 minutes. At one point, Janet laughed at something he said. This was the first time I'd seen her genuinely engage with Daniel's side of the family without looking forced. She talked to Daniel's friends from his shop, asking about their work. No dismissive comments. Just normal conversation. Later that evening, after most guests had left, Janet found me in the kitchen. I'm heading out, she said. But I wanted to tell you the house is beautiful, and I can see how happy you and Daniel are here. Her eyes looked a little watery. She hugged me before I could respond. I'll call you next week. Daniel came in. How'd it go? He asked. She was completely normal. Maybe even pleasant. He smiled. Maybe the therapy was actually working. We cleaned up together. I felt cautiously hopeful. 6 months passed. Our 6th wedding anniversary. I took the afternoon off. My phone rang that morning. Janet's name. Happy anniversary, she said. I'm glad you found someone who loves you as much as Daniel clearly does. Her voice was sincere. I know I haven't always been supportive, but I can see now that Daniel is the right person for you. Tears started. Thank you, I choked out. I hope you have a wonderful day. I sat on the edge of the bed, processing. Janet had finally acknowledged our marriage as real, valid. She'd admitted Daniel was right for me. Something had shifted permanently. That evening, Daniel and I had dinner at the same restaurant where we'd celebrated our 1st anniversary. We talked about how much had changed, how our marriage felt stronger now. We'd survived. We'd established boundaries that worked. We'd built a life that felt solid and permanent. When we got home, I looked at the family photos on our walls. Pictures from recent gatherings, including ones with Janet smiling next to both of us. Our courthouse wedding photo hung in the hallway, and next to it, a picture from our housewarming party with Janet standing between Daniel and me. I realized that while Janet would never be the mother I'd hoped for when I was younger, we'd found a way to move forward that honored both my marriage and my family connections. The boundaries we'd set weren't walls keeping her out. They were guidelines that let us build something healthier and more sustainable. Daniel came up behind me and put his arms around my waist. He said, "The house feels like us now." Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with a family member to protect your relationship or your peace? How did they react? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments.